Deep in the fog-shrouded hollows of eastern Kentucky, where ancient secrets hide within the folds of the mountains, a discovery in the autumn of 1987 would unravel one of the most disturbing family mysteries in American history. They found the Calder Boy of Appalachia after 40 years. The secret he told changed everything. This is the story of the Calders. A bloodline so intertwined it defied nature itself, and the boy who survived to tell a truth that would shake an entire region to its core. Our first chapter begins on a cold October morning in McCreary County, Kentucky. The year is 1987, and two hikers stumble upon an abandoned cabin near the Cumberland Falls area. The structure is barely standing, its wooden walls blackened by decades of neglect and rain. Inside, among scattered belongings and rotting furniture, they find him. A young man, approximately in his late 20s, is huddled in a corner, his body severely malnourished, his eyes wide with confusion and terror. He cannot speak clearly. His limbs are twisted at unnatural angles. His face bears the unmistakable marks of severe genetic abnormalities, a protruding forehead, eyes set too far apart, a jaw misaligned. The authorities are called immediately. Paramedics are horrified by what they see when they arrive. The young man, who would later be identified as Thomas Calder, had clearly spent years, perhaps his entire life, in complete isolation. His skin is pale, almost translucent, covered in sores and scars. His teeth are rotten, many missing entirely. But it is his eyes that disturb the rescuers most. They hold a strange mixture of profound sadness and innocence, as if he has endured horrors no human should ever witness. Thomas is rushed to a hospital in Somerset, Kentucky, where doctors begin the painstaking process of trying to understand his condition. Initial examinations reveal a litany of medical issues: severe malnutrition, untreated infections, bone deformities consistent with rickets, and the clear signs of inbreeding. His DNA tells a story medical professionals have only read about in textbooks. A genetic profile so compressed it suggests his parents were not just related, but closely related, possibly siblings or parent and child. The medical team is stunned. How could someone like Thomas have survived this long? And more importantly, where had he come from? The investigation begins immediately. Local authorities contact the Kentucky State Police, who assign Detective Raymond Holloway to the case. Holloway is a seasoned investigator, a man who has seen his share of darkness in the Appalachian region, but nothing could prepare him for what he was about to uncover. He starts by interviewing the hikers who found Thomas, taking detailed notes about the cabin's condition and location. Then he visits the site himself. The cabin sits at the end of a barely visible trail, miles from the nearest road. It was clear that whoever lived here wanted to remain hidden from the world. Inside, Holloway finds remnants of a life lived in complete seclusion: old cans of food, tattered clothing, handmade tools, and disturbing drawings on the walls, crude sketches of faces, some recognizably human, others grotesquely distorted. In one corner, he discovers a stack of old photographs, their edges yellowed and curled with age. The images show a family, a man and a woman, both with similar facial features, standing beside several children. The children vary in age, but all share the same unsettling characteristics: wide-set eyes, prominent foreheads, and expressions that seem disconnected from reality. On the back of one photograph, a date is scrawled in fading ink: 1943. Holloway realizes he is looking at a family that had been isolated for decades, perhaps generations. But who were they? And how did they end up here? As news of Thomas Calder's discovery spreads, residents of nearby towns begin to whisper. The name Calder is not unfamiliar in these parts. Older residents recall stories passed down from their grandparents, tales of a strange family that lived deep in the mountains, rarely seen and never spoken to. Some say the Calders were outcasts, driven away by their own kin for reasons too shameful to mention. Others claim they chose isolation, retreating into the wilderness to escape judgment and persecution. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain: the Calders had been hiding something for a very long time. Detective Holloway begins digging through county records, searching for any mention of the Calder name. What he finds is both deeply troubling and fascinating. The Calders first appear in McCreary County records in the late 1800s, listed as a small farming family that settled near the Daniel Boone National Forest. But as the decades pass, the records become sparse, almost as if the family was deliberately erasing itself from official documentation. Birth certificates are missing, death records are incomplete, and property deeds are transferred in ways that suggest the family was avoiding outside contact. By the 1930s, the Sayres had virtually disappeared from public records altogether. Holloway contacts genealogists and historians who specialize in Appalachian family lineages. What they uncover is chilling. The Sayre family, it seems, had practiced intermarriage for generations. Brothers married sisters, cousins married cousins, and in some cases, the relationships appeared even closer. The genetic evidence supported this. When Thomas Sayre's DNA was analyzed more thoroughly, scientists discovered his genetic diversity was among the lowest ever recorded in a living human being. His parents were almost certainly siblings, and their parents before them were likely related as well. The implications were staggering. This was not just a case of isolated incest. This was a family that had systematically bred within itself for over a century, creating a closed genetic loop that resulted in devastating physical and mental consequences. But why? What would drive a family to such extremes? We delve deeper into the history of the Sayre family and the dark motivations behind their isolation. Detective Holloway, now working with a team of social workers, medical experts, and historians, begins to piece together the timeline of the Sayre lineage. He travels to the small town of Whitley City, the closest settlement to where Thomas was found, and starts interviewing elderly residents. Most are reluctant to talk, but eventually a woman named Margaret Thornton, aged 89, agrees to share what she knows. Margaret remembers the Sayres from her childhood in the 1920s. She recalls seeing members of the family occasionally at the general store in Whitley City, always dressed in old, tattered clothing, their faces pale and gaunt. They spoke little and avoided eye contact. Margaret's mother had warned her to stay away from them, saying they were cursed, though she never explained what that meant. Margaret also remembers hearing adults whisper about the Sayres' strange customs. They did not attend church, did not send their children to school, and did not interact with neighbors. Some said the family believed they were special, chosen by God to remain pure, untainted by outsiders. Others claimed the Sayres were simply afraid of the outside world, convinced that leaving their land would bring disaster. Whatever the reason, the family had sealed itself off, both physically and socially, from the rest of society. Holloway follows Margaret's lead and searches for other families who might have interacted with the Sayres. He discovers a man named Earl Pittman, aged 76, who once delivered supplies to the Sayre property in the 1950s. Earl describes the experience as unsettling. The Sayres lived in a cluster of cabins deep in the woods, connected by narrow dirt paths. Earl would leave supplies at the edge of their property and collect payment, usually in the form of wild game or handmade goods, without ever seeing the family. On one occasion, however, he caught a glimpse of a young girl, no more than 10 years old, watching him from behind a tree. Her appearance shocked him. Her face was severely deformed, her eyes uneven, her mouth twisted into a permanent grimace. Earl left quickly and never returned. He tells Holloway that he always believed the Sayres were hiding something terrible, but he never imagined it was this. As Holloway continues his investigation, he learns that the Sayres' isolation was not accidental. In the early 1900s, the family patriarch, a man named Josiah Sayre, had become obsessed with the idea of preserving bloodline purity. Josiah believed his family descended from a line of early European settlers who possessed superior qualities, strength, intelligence, and resilience. He feared that marrying outside the family would dilute these traits and weaken future generations. So he made a decision: his children would marry only within the family. At first, this meant cousins marrying cousins, a practice not uncommon in isolated rural areas at the time. But as the years passed and the family became more isolated, the unions grew closer. Siblings began marrying siblings, and eventually even parent-child relationships were rumored to occur, though no official records exist to confirm this. Josiah's descendants continued his ideology, believing they were protecting something sacred. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Thomas Sayre is slowly beginning to communicate. With the help of speech therapists and psychologists, he starts to form basic sentences. His vocabulary is limited and his understanding of the outside world is almost non-existent. He had never seen a television, never heard a radio, never read a book. His entire life had been confined to the mountains, to the cabins, and to the family. When asked about his parents, Thomas becomes agitated. He mumbles incoherently, his hands trembling. But gradually, with patience and care, fragments of his story emerge. Thomas reveals he was born in the cabin where he was found. He does not know his exact age, but he believes he's around 27 or 28 years old. His mother's name was Eliza, and his father's name was Jacob. Thomas pauses when he says this, his face contorting with pain and confusion. Then he adds something that chills everyone in the room: Eliza and Jacob were brother and sister. They were also his only family. There were others once, Thomas says, but they are gone now. He does not elaborate on what happened to them, and the medical team does not press him, fearing it will cause further trauma. But it is clear Thomas has witnessed things no child should ever see. The psychological evaluation reveals Thomas suffers from severe developmental delays, likely caused by both genetic factors and extreme social deprivation. He has the cognitive abilities of a young child. Despite being an adult, his understanding of right and wrong is fragmented, shaped entirely by the isolated world he grew up in. He does not understand why people are asking him these questions or why they seem so upset. To him, his life was normal. It was all he had ever known. Detective Holloway now faces a grim task, finding out what happened to the rest of the Sayre family. If Thomas was the only one found alive, where were the others? Were they dead? Did they abandon Thomas? Or was there something even darker at play? Holloway organizes a search team and returns to the area where Thomas was discovered. Over the course of several days, they explore the surrounding forest, looking for additional cabins, graves, or any signs of human activity. What they find is both horrifying and tragic. Hidden among the trees, they discover 3 more cabins, all in various states of decay. Inside, they find evidence of recent habitation, clothing, food supplies, and makeshift furniture. But there are no people. In one cabin, they find a grave, a small mound of earth marked with a wooden cross. They exhume the remains and discover the body of a young girl, no more than 12 years old. The autopsy reveals severe malnutrition and multiple untreated infections. Her skeletal structure shows clear signs of genetic abnormalities. She had been dead for approximately 5 years. In another cabin, they find journals, pages and pages of handwritten entries, some dating back to the 1960s. The entries are written by various members of the Sayre family, documenting their daily lives, their beliefs, and their struggles. The tone of the writings shifts over time. Early entries are hopeful, almost optimistic, describing the family's determination to live according to their principles. But as the years pass, the entries become darker, filled with references to sickness, death, and despair. One entry, dated 1976, describes the birth of a child so severely deformed it lived only a few hours. Another entry, from 1982, mentions the death of the family matriarch, a woman named Ruth, who had been the glue holding the family together. After her death, the entries become sporadic and incoherent, suggesting the family was falling apart. This section focuses on the unraveling of the Sayre family and the heartbreaking reality of Thomas's existence. As Detective Holloway and his team continue to search the area, they find more evidence of the family's decline. In a third cabin, they discover the remains of 2 adults, a man and a woman, lying side by side on a makeshift bed. The bodies are in advanced stages of decomposition, but the medical examiner estimates they have been dead for at least 3 years. DNA testing confirms these are Thomas's parents, Jacob and Eliza Sayre. The cause of death is determined to be starvation and exposure. It appeared that in their final days, they were too weak to care for themselves or their son. The discovery raises a disturbing question: if Thomas's parents died 3 years ago, how did he survive alone for so long? Thomas provides the answer, though his explanation is fragmented and difficult to follow. He says that after his parents stopped moving, he stayed in the cabin with them for a long time. He did not understand that they were dead. He thought they were sleeping. He tried to wake them, but they would not respond. Eventually, hunger drove him to leave the cabin and search for food. He ate berries, roots, and whatever small animals he could catch. He drank water from streams. He survived by instinct, like a wild animal. But he always returned to the cabin because it was the only place he knew. The psychological team is devastated by this revelation. Thomas had spent years living in isolation, caring for himself without any understanding of the world beyond the forest. He had no concept of time, no sense of future or past. He simply existed, day after day, in a state of primal survival. As the investigation continues, Detective Holloway uncovers more disturbing details about the Sayre family's practices through interviews with distant relatives who had long since severed ties with the family. He learns the Sayres had a rigid set of rules designed to maintain their isolation. Children were not allowed to leave the property. Contact with outsiders was strictly forbidden. And most chillingly, family members who questioned these rules or tried to escape were punished severely. One former relative, a woman named Linda Hayes, recalls that her grandmother had been a Sayre before marrying out of the family in the 1940s. Linda's grandmother rarely spoke about her upbringing, but she once mentioned that her younger brother had tried to run away when he was 15. He was caught and brought back, and Linda's grandmother never saw him again. She always believed he had been killed, though she had no proof. Holloway realizes the Sayre family was not just isolated, it was a prison. The children born into this family had no choice, no freedom, no hope of escape. They were trapped by the decisions of their ancestors, condemned to a life of suffering and genetic deterioration. The emotional weight of this realization is overwhelming. As Thomas continues his recovery, he begins to ask questions. He wants to know why he looks different from the doctors and nurses. He wants to know why he was alone for so long. The medical team does their best to explain, but how do you tell someone they're the product of generations of inbreeding? How do you explain that their entire existence is the result of a twisted ideology that valued purity over humanity? One afternoon during a therapy session, Thomas says something that breaks the heart of everyone in the room. He looks at his therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Ellen Morris, and asks, "Am I bad?" Dr. Morris struggles to find the right words. She tells him, "No, you are not bad. You are a survivor. You are strong." But Thomas shakes his head. He says, "My father told me we were special. He said we had to stay together. He said outsiders would hurt us. But you are outsiders and you are nice. So was my father wrong?" Dr. Morris does not have an answer. She simply holds Thomas's hand and lets him cry. This moment is a turning point in Thomas's recovery. For the first time, he begins to understand that the world he grew up in was not normal, that his family's beliefs were harmful, and that he was a victim of circumstances beyond his control. Now, take a moment and think. If you were Thomas, discovering that everything you believed was a lie, what would you say? Comment below. I survived to tell the truth. Let's honor his courage together. This part examines the broader implications of the Sayre case and the scientific understanding of inbreeding. The discovery of Thomas Sayre sends shockwaves through the medical and scientific communities. Geneticists from universities across the country request access to Thomas's DNA, hoping to study the effects of extreme inbreeding on human physiology. The results are both horrifying and fascinating. Thomas's genetic profile reveals a level of homozygosity, a measure of identical genetic material that is rarely seen in humans. Normally, individuals inherit one set of genes from each parent, resulting in genetic diversity. But in Thomas's case, his parents were so closely related that he inherited nearly identical genetic material from both sides. This has resulted in the expression of numerous recessive genes, many of which cause serious health problems. Thomas suffers from a host of genetic disorders, including congenital heart defects, skeletal abnormalities, immune system deficiencies, and cognitive impairments. His life expectancy is significantly reduced, and he will require ongoing medical care for the rest of his life. But beyond the physical consequences, the psychological impact is equally devastating. Thomas's case becomes a focal point for discussions about the dangers of inbreeding and the importance of genetic diversity. Scientists use his story to educate the public about the risks associated with consanguineous relationships. In isolated communities where marriage options are limited, inbreeding can occur unintentionally. But in cases like the Sayres, where it was deliberate and sustained over generations, the consequences are catastrophic. Meanwhile, Detective Holloway continues to investigate the extent of the Sayre family's history. He discovers the family's isolation was not unique. Throughout Appalachia, there are stories of other families who have lived in similar seclusion, though few have taken it to the extreme the Sayres did. Holloway interviews social workers and historians who have studied these communities. They explain that in the early 20th century, many rural families in Appalachia lived in extreme poverty and isolation. Geographic barriers such as mountains and rivers made travel difficult. Economic hardship meant families could not afford to move to cities or towns. And cultural factors, including distrust of outsiders and a strong emphasis on family loyalty, reinforced the tendency to stay within tight-knit groups. In some cases, this led to intermarriage simply because there were no other options. But the Sayres were different. Their isolation was ideological, driven by a belief in bloodline purity and a fear of contamination from the outside world. This made their situation far more extreme and far more tragic. As Holloway pieces together the final chapters of the Sayre family's story, he learns there may have been others who escaped. In the 1950s, a young woman named Mary Sayre reportedly left the family and moved to a nearby town. She changed her name and never spoke about her past. Holloway tracks down her descendants, who confirm the story. Mary had told her children she came from a troubled family, but she never provided details. Her children describe her as a deeply traumatized woman who struggled with mental health issues throughout her life. Holloway wonders how many others like Mary there might be, people who escaped the Sayre family but carried the scars with them forever. Back in the hospital, Thomas is slowly adapting to life outside the mountains. He is learning to read and write, though progress is slow. He enjoys watching nature documentaries on television, marveling at images of animals and places he never knew existed. He has developed a fondness for drawing, and his sketches, though crude, reveal a deep longing for connection and understanding. But Thomas is also haunted by his past. He has nightmares about the cabin, about his parents, about the loneliness. He asks Dr. Morris if he will ever be normal. And she tells him honestly that normal is different for everyone. What matters is that he is safe now and that he has people who care about him. One day, Thomas asks if he can visit the place where he was found. Dr. Morris is hesitant, but she consults with the medical team, and they agree it might help Thomas process his trauma. They arrange for a supervised visit to the site. When Thomas arrives at the cabin, he stands silently for a long time, staring at the decaying structure. Then, he walks inside, moving slowly through the rooms. He touches the walls, the floor, the remnants of his old life. Tears stream down his face. He tells Dr. Morris that this place is where he learned to survive, but it is also where he learned to be alone. He says he does not want to be alone anymore. Dr. Morris assures him he will never be alone again. As they leave the cabin, Thomas turns back one last time. He whispers something under his breath, a prayer or a farewell, and then he walks away, leaving the past behind. This section brings the story to a powerful and emotional conclusion. In the years following his discovery, Thomas Sayre becomes a symbol of resilience and survival. His story is featured in documentaries, medical journals, and news articles. He is invited to speak at conferences, though his limited communication skills make public appearances difficult. Instead, he allows others to tell his story, hoping it will prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. Detective Holloway retires from the police force, but he remains deeply connected to Thomas's case. He writes a book about the investigation, donating all proceeds to organizations that support survivors of trauma and genetic disorders. The book becomes a bestseller, bringing national attention to the issue of inbreeding and the importance of social intervention in isolated communities. Thomas, now in his 30s, lives in a group home in Lexington, Kentucky. He receives ongoing medical care and therapy. He has learned to perform basic tasks such as cooking simple meals and managing his daily routine. He has made friends among the staff and other residents. And he finds joy in small things, watching the sunrise, listening to music, spending time in the garden. But Thomas's health remains fragile. The years of neglect and genetic damage have taken a toll on his body. In 1995, at the age of 36, Thomas suffers a massive heart attack. He is rushed to the hospital, but doctors are unable to save him. He dies peacefully, surrounded by the people who have cared for him. His final words are, "Thank you for finding me." Thomas's death is mourned by many. Dr. Morris, who has stayed by his side throughout his journey, delivers a eulogy that captures the essence of his life. She speaks about his courage, his kindness, and his determination to understand a world that was entirely foreign to him. She says Thomas's story is not just about the horrors of inbreeding or society's failures to protect vulnerable individuals. It is also a story about the power of the human spirit to endure, to adapt, and to hope. In the years that follow, the Sayre case becomes a turning point in how authorities handle isolated families and communities. Social workers are trained to recognize signs of inbreeding and to intervene before situations reach the level of the Sayres. Genetic counseling becomes more widely available in rural areas, and laws are strengthened to protect children from being kept in conditions of extreme isolation. The cabin where Thomas was found is eventually torn down, but a small memorial is erected in its place. The plaque reads, "In memory of Thomas Sayre and all those who suffered in silence. May their stories remind us of the importance of compassion, vigilance, and justice." Detective Holloway visits the memorial every year on the anniversary of Thomas's discovery. He stands quietly, reflecting on the case that changed his life. He thinks about the other families that might still be out there, hidden in the mountains, trapped by ideology and fear. And he vows to continue fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves. The legacy of the Sayre family is a complex one. It's a reminder of the dangers of isolation, the consequences of unchecked ideology, and the resilience of the human spirit. It is a story that challenges us to look beyond our own comfortable lives and to recognize the suffering that exists in the shadows. And it is a call to action, urging us to protect the most vulnerable among us and to ensure no one else endures what Thomas Sayre endured. As the sun sets over the Appalachian Mountains, casting long shadows across the valleys and hollows, the story of the Sayres fades into history. But it is not forgotten. It lives on in the memories of those who knew Thomas, in the lessons learned by medical professionals and social workers, and in the hearts of everyone who believes that every life, no matter how broken or damaged, has value and deserves dignity. They found the Calder Boy of Appalachia after 40 years, and the secret he told changed everything. It changed how we understand the consequences of isolation and inbreeding. It changed how we approach the protection of vulnerable individuals. And it changed the lives of everyone who had the privilege of knowing Thomas Sayre, a young man who survived against all odds and taught us what it means to be truly human. If you made it to the end of this story, it means you understand the importance of remembering these hidden tragedies. If you haven't already subscribed, do it now because this channel is dedicated to bringing you the most powerful and untold stories from history. Leave a comment saying, "I watched until the end," so I can get to know you and see who truly appreciates the stories here on this channel. Hit the like button if this story moved you, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. These stories need to be told, and together we can make sure they are never forgotten. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.